Hello. Yes, that's right, it's an automation video on this channel where I'm actually starting the video in the right game. And it's even entirely my own car this time. No, I haven't gone insane, not entirely anyway, I just sort of got this question in my mind. Am I still capable of making a normal car? So, we're making a normal car. I've chosen the year 1953 because that's when this body unlocks, however I'm not a very decisive person, so it'll change several times throughout the build. 1963 is what I finally settle on, I think, though it might be 62 instead. I'm not going to check. Anyway, I go through all this mechanical stuff for a bit, but it's not too important here, particularly because I have no idea what I'm doing. The engine's an i6, chosen essentially at random, although I was tempted to go with the turbocharged V8 inspired by the Oldsmobile Jetfire. I decided against this because, apparently, automation doesn't unlock turbos until sometime in the 70s. I tune it for a while, giving it probably a little too much power, this will come back to bite me in Beam later, and then I move on to body morphing. I always test bodies before I actually use them for a video, so I already know what morphs I need, I'm just entering the values from screenshots I took of my test build. Next up, the various trim level mechanical stuff. I don't remember having seen a clutched differential in automation before, though it's been a while since I've made something vintage. After an off-camera beam test later, I will discover the car's essentially a drift car with this setup, so it gets switched out for an open diff. I choose the tires based on looks, not like handling or anything like that, and I make them really narrow to be period correct. Then I move on to the brakes, where I just sort of select random stuff. Looking into what single and twin leading shoe drum brakes are exactly, it turns out that this relatively unsporty car should probably get singles, so I change that off screen as well. Like a real car designer from this era, I go through the aero menu in about 2 seconds, and so we're onto the interior, which I don't spend much time on either. Finally, safety, the least important part of an auto car, followed by the suspension, which will be badly tuned later on. I don't even know where to begin styling a car if I'm not cutting off the entire front end and giving it a custom engine, so I start with the paint and the rims. Then I move on to the front styling, which turns out to be pretty difficult. The grille and the bumper essentially stay the same, but I experiment with a few different headlights, none of which really quite work for me. I eventually decide to make the grille a bit more three-dimensional to procrastinate choosing some good lights, so I make the mesh transparent, add some stuff behind it, add a radiator, and then add some shading so it doesn't stand out as much. I also try out some chrome trim for the grille, but I can't come up with anything I like. The same goes for my attempt at a front license plate. For some reason, license plates in auto just look awful. I'm not sure why. We'll revisit that later. Particularly since the car is currently, though not permanently, a 1959 model year, it could use something sort of wingy on the sides, so I add these ridges. Not as flamboyant as some cars from this era, but it's a bit more visually interesting than it was before. And then it's back to messing with the grille. My front end work takes quite a while, but I eventually settle on this, with the headlights not aligned, the chrome bits on the grille shifted up, and vents underneath. It's a little weird, but I think it looks a lot better than the boring generic stuff I had earlier. Add some turn signals, a badge, and one more vent, and we can finally move on to the sides for now. The side styling isn't nearly as difficult as the front, thankfully. I start by adding panel gaps for the ridge I added earlier, thankfully there's a fixture that makes this really easy. Then I add the mirror, a single one because vintage, and door handles. I want a side badge, but the car needs a model name for that. After asking around, it's my friend Impos who comes up with the name I need. Anonymous Motors Bluebird. A bit of chrome trim at the bottom finishes up the sides, so we turn to the rear, which is the hardest part by far. I start with the same rear bumper as I used for the front, but very quickly get stuck. Rear styling has always been the most difficult for me for whatever reason, but this time it's especially bad. Whatever burst of motivation got me through the front styling in only a few hours, I work slowly, has died down, and none of the ideas I try look particularly good. In the end I settle for this. It's not great, and I'm not proud of it, but unlike my other designs, it's mostly inoffensive. I should also note there's a bit of trickery going on with that license plate, and I will have to back up slightly to explain it. As I discovered while working on the front, I can't get a 50s or 60s style license plate. There are for some reason a ton of mods for North Carolina plates, including one from the right time period, but none of them actually have working textures. This forces me to use the California plate, but I don't really want this car's license plate to read @Matin. The only similar plate I could try is a GTA plate, which is not ideal, but after thinking for a moment I realize I can probably combine them to get a California license plate with a more normal text. This causes some issues with shading. I could rotate the plates more to fix it, but that looks awful from the side, so instead I modify the shading texture I used to darken the radiator. That seems to work. Anyway, back in the present, or, well, the past, since this is post-commentary, not to mention you're watching in the future, but you know what I mean, back where we left off. I considered not doing an interior for this car because I'm really lazy, but I compromised by using a single fixture dashboard and doing the rest myself. It was very difficult to actually fit the dashboard in the car. To stop it from clipping through the bodywork, I actually had to rotate it downward, which is really not ideal because it gives me more work to do with the interior lining and the door panels. I give the car a steering wheel from the same mod as the dashboard, followed by some seats from a different mod while using a crash test dummy as a size reference. It also demonstrates just how tiny this car is. You'd hardly believe that Anonymous Motors is, in theory, an American brand. The exhaust kind of gets in the way of everything, but if I hide it we lose this visible part under the rear bumper, so I have to replicate that with some 3D pieces first. Then I go about enclosing the interior, making a ridge on the door panels that more or less lines up with that weird dashboard. Those door panels are, as ever, the focus of my work in the interior. There's plenty of chrome trim because this is an early 60s car, plenty of horizontal lines because this is an early 60s car, and then some window cranks to join the door handles because, well, you know. At this point the interior's done other than one thing. Roof lining. I, however, really don't want to do that, and because this car has a soft top, or at least uses a material that makes it look like one, I can cheat a bit and just choose a material that's two-sided. And that's the car done, I think. Let's take some photos and get it to Beam. And animate the steering wheel off camera, too. Okay, I've got the car in Beam, and it's exported better than I had expected. The ridge I added going onto the rear is pretty much seamless, as is the license plate, somehow, and as you can see, that export quality continues on the front and sides. The only real issue is the white gauges in the interior, but they wouldn't have worked anyway, so it's no big deal. The car doesn't handle as well as it looks, though. You'd think that a car this basic would have reasonably generic, predictable handling, but nope. The original clutched limited slip differential I had in the car was essentially a welded diff, but even after replacing it with an open one, the car is pretty oversteery. This is particularly problematic when braking, as you're about to see. It's time to run the Bluebird around our Imola test track. Okay, plenty of wheel spin off the line. I don't think you can hear it under my voice, but the sound kind of pans to the right. This is because the car has an open differential, and pretty soon it's just one tire spinning. It's very difficult for me to tell when to shift here. I had the volume turned up uncomfortably high while driving this, my ears kind of hurt after doing a few takes, but still all I can really hear is the transmission whine, so I'm kind of guessing at when to shift. I entered this corner a little bit late. In previous takes I'd got it still kind of perfect and it still just oversteered, so I don't think it matters that much. This corner I get about as good as you can in this car. For some reason, mid-speed corners are its absolute worst point. I don't know why that is, it's just really twitchy. This corner I brake very early for. The trail braking is something that just will kill you in this car. The rear will come around and you will crash. I'd rather not do that. At the end of this straight, there's a hairpin. This hairpin is kind of scary. In previous takes, I always kind of ended up counter-steering throughout this whole corner. In this one, I got it just about right, only a minor twitch on the end. We go up this hill, and there's honestly not that much to say about it, so I'll shut up until we get to the crest. Which reveals the next turn. In both this and the previous car I ran, the cars got kind of unstable here. I don't know why that is, it shouldn't be the case. Maybe I'm just bad at driving. In any case, we go down this hill. The corner up there can be taken flat, but I'm not going to do it in this car, no way. The car is just too unstable, especially on changes of elevation like this. This tight corner here I have taken completely sideways in this car in previous takes. Don't do that, it isn't fast. This straight goes up to another chicane. The chicane is sometimes a difficult braking point for faster cars, but this is not one of those. It's a very easy braking point, and I actually braked a little bit too early. You would think with this slow a corner entry I would be able to get a safe exit, but no, not even close. Big twitch there, only just saved it. This is an old car and it handles like one. We go down this straight into sort of a blind corner. I know from experience that I need to brake slightly before that in order to make the corner after it. This car doesn't really have the greatest brakes. They lock up extremely easily, so it's a good idea to brake early. Maybe not that early, but early. There's one corner left. We kind of make it there with a little bit more wiggling, but it's fine. Going down this straight, not really much to say. Foot to the floor, shift when I kind of think I'm supposed to shift. I still really can't tell. If this car had working gauges, it would make life easier, but it does not. I think we almost hit the top of 4th gear here, which is 120 miles an hour, and it's across the line. Let's see how fast we went. Okay, it won't really surprise anyone to know that it's not going up here. Let's just scroll down a bit. Little further. Okay, there we go. Nice solid 12th place. Not great, but hey, at least it beats the cement mixer. Okay, that's the video done other than the outro, and as always, the outro is where I can be brutally honest about the build. And, being brutally honest, it did not go very well. You see, this was not supposed to be a video where I make a generic car. It was actually one where I make a sort of worn-down junkyard sort of car. However, that part of the video went really badly. I wasn't happy with the auto part, it exported horribly, and it ended up performing basically no differently from the original vehicle, so I just left it out of the edit until now. That said, the normal version of the Bluebird is actually fairly decent, other than that it's kind of lazily made since it wasn't the original focus of the video, so things could have definitely been worse. If you want to download the automation file for the car, or even the failed junkyard version, they'll be on my Discord server linked in the description. For now though, thanks for watching and goodbye.